It's a pleasure to welcome you all today in this theme. I'm really suspicious in this debate because, well, I really enjoy this UX and UI, so it will be a pleasure to be the moderator of this debate, and I hope you have a great experience on that. So to start this debate, we'll ask you just to present yourself for 2 or 3 minutes, just to the audience know you a little bit more. Starting with Patricia, then Victoria, then Robin, please.
Okay, nice to join you all. My name is Patricia Roedel. I am a journalist, in fact, and I've been working for 4 years now with a project, which is nowadays not a project anymore. It became a process, a work process. It's a project about rebuilding, redesigning, and changing not only the design, but the architecture and the language of the Chamber of Deputies website to be more suitable for citizens who are not specialists on legislative process. So nowadays I'm working on a specific area that was created to manage the website in all these features. And it's been quite a challenge. A process is different than a project, yeah.
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, in the paper and the mind, everything works smoothly. We understand. So, Victoria, nice to welcome you today. You can present yourself.
So, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. So, Victoria Lindia, I work at the House of Commons in Canada. I am the Senior Technology Strategist specifically in the digital workplace and collaboration areas. So I'm an engineer by study, but I have 25 years of experience in a variety of different companies, small enterprise, large corporations, startups, telcos, service providers, and in legislative public service. I've been with the House of Commons for approximately 13 years. And yeah, so there's always something challenging trying to match up technology to tradition. That's always a fun topic.
Thank you, Victoria. Robin, you can present yourself, please.
Yes, hi. For anyone who wasn't in the last session, I'm the Deputy Director of the Knesset website. I've been in the Knesset working on the website pretty much since the website opened in 1997. So I've been there for a while. I've been doing this for a while. I pretty much grew with the job. As far as what I studied, I did not study computers. I'm a social worker by profession. Go figure. Anyhow, so and most of the work that I do on the website actually is technical stuff in the background. Most of what I do is I integrate the content, the design, the UX, UI, the design, and the functionality, and we'll put that together so that the public can actually see it. That's pretty much what my life is like. I do that all day, every day. We try to make sure when we have new projects and stuff like that, one of the main things that I work on and I take very, very seriously is the integrity of the data, to make sure that what is going out to the public is actually, especially when we're talking about historical information, to make sure that the information that is going out to the public is indeed what is really going on or what really happened. And again, we take a lot of care to make sure that the public is getting the right information and at the right time and stuff like that. Work is always very interesting. There's always challenges, and with, again, the idea is to get to pretty much be as transparent as possible and be available for the public to make sure that they can get all the information that they want and need from the website. that's pretty much it.
Perfect, Robin, thank you. So we will start with a warm-up of individual questions of about 5 minutes for each one. So I'd like to start with you, Victoria. The main question is, we know that the pandemic of COVID-19 demanded the creation of remote spaces and offices to replicate the dynamics of the parliamentary activities at a distance. In large countries such as Canada, for example, it can be helpful for MPs to have the freedom to participate and have full access to their activities from different locations throughout the country. Can you please share with us which challenge or which are the main challenges you aimed to tackle and how MPs and colleagues responded to that idea of working in the distance, not in the house itself?
For sure. So, I mean, we started our journey probably 3 or 4 years ago. We had a vision of a digital office, and the goal of the digital office was really to offer flexibility to the MPs and their staff. The disruption to get an office to the new way of working was could be quite challenging. That was one of the biggest fears that the MPs and their staff had is, will my business be disrupted? How will my work, my day-to-day work that I'm responsible for, and how will my duties be affected by you coming in and overhauling the way that I work? Some MPs have had their seats for several years. They've had their staff for several years. They know what to do. They're very efficient in the current system. So moving them to a new system was there was some fear there. We had the fortunate event of an election in 2019, where we had approximately a third of the seats exchange. And we found that that was a perfect opportunity to actually move some of the offices because new MPs were coming in, and we offered them the brand new way of working. And then after the election was done, the idea was to go back and retrofit the old offices one by one, which was very time consuming, scheduling and moving data and training. But then COVID hit, the pandemic hit in 2020. So we were forced to expedite that. But instead of a fear, many MPs turned to desire. So at that point, their staff was remote. They were in different areas. They had challenges like networking, getting people connected, desktops being on a table in a riding office or in a constituency office, and their staff being at home. So they were asking for laptops. And so the trickle effect of that desire put pressure on us to actually deliver in a faster way. Really, the biggest challenge was change management, people change management, perception of the change, trying to show that the change would bring positive and benefits to the MPs. And I think overall it was quite successful. There are still some bumps along the road. Being remote, especially in a large country in Canada, there are differences in network and internet service provider service levels. So being able to offer the same type of service across the land is a bit difficult. If you're in downtown Toronto, there's no issues. But if you're in Northern Canada, there could be issues with regards to speeds, with quality of service, or sometimes there is no service at all. So there are some challenges still, but we work through them. And ultimately, the biggest lesson learned is truly looking at the human change management and seeing what are the fears that the office or the person is having, and try to work through those.
Thank you, Victoria. Just as an additional little question,
Sure.
I was thinking about it was the language, for example, of Canada. We know that we have English and French.
That's right.
In this change management, it was more challenging or same thing?
No, from a language perspective, the administration and the support staff are fully bilingual. So we offer service in the language of choice. So language typically is not an issue. All of our correspondence, training, just from the get-go, any service or product that we offer must be bilingual. So that's a base foundational requirement for anything that we do, both in staffing and in offerings.
Perfect, thank you. So the next question I would like to direct to Robin. Robin, different knowledge and tools are required to develop and bring improvements to platforms, websites, or applications assessed both by internal and external users of the house. We know that these projects require diverse details that are interconnected and are multidisciplinary. So considering that, could you share the most interesting aspects your team found to bring improvements to the user experience in Knesset's website? Here, folks, in the website itself.
Okay. Okay, the word interesting is obviously very subjective. Okay, so it might be interesting for me, might not be interesting for anybody else, but I can definitely tell you what we do, and then someone else can decide if that's interesting. If we have a new project that we want to do, and I actually have a project in mind that I can even give as an example. Back in 2014, we did a whole overhaul of our legislation, of the legislation part of the website. Up until then, the different stages of legislation were all presented. We basically had a database of bills. We had a database of laws that were passed. There was no connection between them, which is kind of strange because they're obviously connected. Anyhow, we did a whole overhaul, and in order to decide how to make the interface for the user, for the end user, and again, our idea is to try to make it as accessible. Now, when you use the word accessible, that means there are two levels to that now. Nowadays, the word accessibility also means for people, people with, I don't know, what is the politically correct term in English? People with handicaps, people, okay, I guess I'm out of the English language away from that too long. There's a certain politically correct way to say it in Hebrew. Anyhow, so accessibility on that level, and accessibility that everybody can actually go and find the laws easily when they want to. And so what we did was the very first step of that process of making this new whole website and making it as user-friendly as possible was basically, we went to go steal ideas. Okay, not steal, sorry, borrow, get inspired by, or I mean, it's funny because I like to use the word steal and then everyone like yells at me that, no, we didn't steal anything. The point is that what we did was we went to many parliamentary websites, including the Canadian website. I don't think we managed to get to the Brazilian website, sorry. But we did go to the Canadian Parliament website and many others. And we looked around at how they presented their laws and their whole legislation section. And then we started to pick. And we started to pick, and we would say, okay, well, we like this component. That's a cool idea. We like this calendar over here. That's a neat idea. We like the color coding over here. That's also cool. We love the fact, by the way, that in the Canadian Parliament, everything is completely bilingual. We don't have the budget for that, so that took care of that. But you know, that was also very impressive. And again, we nitpicked. We picked from all different components that we liked, and then. Again, we didn't exactly steal them. We did our best to actually improve on them and say, okay, we like the color coding idea. Here's how we're going to implement that by us. So it was very, again, you can say it was interesting actually going and it's like shopping. You're shopping for ideas. And again, I'm not going to go and look at other governmental websites in Israel to get ideas because their work is much different than ours. I need to go find, I need to find websites that have the same work as ours. And at the end of the day, when you look at parliamentary websites, they are all basically have the same basic information that needs to get to the public. So that's where we went shopping, so to speak. So now we're actually, 7, 8 years later, we had started the process already again of revamping, of taking our section of legislation, which, by the way, the legislation section of our website, because of all these fantastic ideas that we managed to acquire and get inspired by, and then fit into our site, was actually prize winning. It actually, it ended up being, the feedback from the public is excellent and stuff like that. We're now redoing it again. This time, when we went going shopping for ideas, believe it or not, we actually looked more now in the financial world, in the forgetting my English here, in the world of consumerism and shopping. Literally, I'm shopping in the shopping now, okay, in the shopping world. So when you go to a website and you want to buy, I want to buy a black dress, okay, so I will go to a website and I will click on women's clothing, and then under women's clothing on the side, rather than doing a search on women's clothing dress black, it works the other way around. I get to women's clothing, I get all of the clothing, and then I click on a filter that says dresses. Okay, then I get to another filter, black, and I get all the black dresses. In other words, it's been flipped around, and we've already implemented that sort of filtering into our website on different databases, and now we're going to also implement it in the in the section on legislation also. In other words, so again, basically the question the interesting aspects that found to bring improvements is, the bottom line is to go shopping out there for ideas and seeing how it will be best to implement and make the website as user friendly as possible to the largest section of the public you can get to. Okay.
I love the expression "go shopping for ideas." I will internalize that, because I transform it, for example, benchmarking for bench. We only call bench, but now I use "go shopping for ideas." So my next question will be for you, Patricia. We know that your work aims specifically at the external public. You coordinate a project for the Brazilian House of Representatives new portal, new portal to focus on the citizen. The project has now become a continuous process with the creation of an area to specifically manage the portal. What are the main challenges to continue this work? I will divide in 2 questions. The main challenges to continue this work, and what's the difference between implementing a project, that's a tough one, implementing a project like this and maintaining it?
Okay. The main difference is, when you are implementing a project, you usually have many sponsors, political and administrative ones, that help us a lot to do it. We have financial, we have a team to help us, and every eyes are looking at our project and helping us and want it to succeed. After that, when it becomes a process, a continuous process, there are new projects coming and the process is set aside. So we have been facing many challenges. It usually happens with every new continuous process anywhere. The main challenge is about our organization structure and governance. Our new website management sector was instituted apart from the IT sector. So we can't just ask them to fix errors or solve problems with priority, because we compete with other internal areas for the IT human resources. And more complicated than that is some systems and even pages of the website are technically maintained by an IT team dedicated to the legislative area, which has their own priorities related to the legislative process itself. So, of course, it won't be their priority to correct information specifically published for the citizens or to change a page to make it more findable or understandable. They are worried about the legislative process itself. Another challenge is to convince the technical staff to accept plain language adaptations or usability changes that are better for mobile screens, for example, as they use the website for their daily work on desktops. Or imagine this challenge to explain why, in the name of usability, the content should go to a deeper layer of the website. So if you don't have a sponsor, a management, a director to help you with that and to say, no, that must should done, it's very difficult to apply it on a daily basis, all these changes. To sum up, the main battle is to convince many actors, internal actors, of the importance of the citizen as a major stakeholder. We think of ourselves as a kind of ombudsman of the website's architecture, usability, and language. And what Victoria said about making major changes between two legislatures when new MPs are coming, that was our strategy too, when it was still a project. We have done the main changes between two legislatures and to reduce the impact of the major transparency we are bringing to the website. But now we have the same MPs working and we have to cope with that.
Perfect, Patricia, thank you. So I really understand. Sometimes I remember about some projects or even hackathon projects like, oh, this word, for example, should be that due to plain text or even the comprehension of the user. And sometimes the front end, for example, developers, oh, but we will have to create an
Right, Sarah's frozen by you guys also? Yeah? Okay, she'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sarah is frozen for you?
Yeah. There, she's coming back. Okay.
Technology is not perfect.
Nope.
We were talking about problems to remote things, like problems like that. My internet went to Jupiter, but I'm here. I'm back. So we were close to go through the second round of the questions before this minor issue. So I will start with Victoria. It's a broader question for all of you, starting with Victoria. We know that the pandemic of COVID-19 demanded the creation of digital spaces to replicate the dynamics of the parliamentary activities virtually. However, it's also a fact that many legislatures already had a robust digital transformation strategy, such as Knesset and the House of Commons, for example. I would like to ask your insights on the most common digital demands you receive from colleagues in technical staff and members of the Parliament, starting with Victoria. Then I'll go to Robin and then Patricia.
For sure. So as I mentioned in the previous comment that I made around change management and rolling out new offerings to the newly elected MPs in between elections, that actually produced one huge demand as soon as COVID hit, in that video conferencing was a huge demand as soon as the pandemic hit. And we weren't in the position to be able to offer video conferencing to all MPs at the same time, because we had started to retrofit the offices of the returning MPs and when COVID hit. So that was one of the big digital demands. And we supplemented with things like Zoom, and we are an Office 365 Teams-based environment. So until it was fully available, there were some challenges on that front. But really, from just a general day-to-day demand, it's really, when you're working remotely, there are environmental constraints such as noise. You know, as you can see, I'm in my office at home, and the echoes and the lighting might be different, which is not a huge deal if you're in an informal setting. But as soon as you're in a very official setting, those constraints or those environmental factors could pose some serious issues. So things like reliance on headsets, and not just regular headsets, quality, predictable headsets with certain standards, things like ring lights, network connectivity or Wi-Fi access points that are reliable and that the users have knowledge or access to information on proper placement, cellular reinforcements. So it's really around setting up offices in a way that is more consistent and predictable, so that when you do have official video conference sessions or just sessions in general, they're as efficient as possible. So those were the big demands as we entered the pandemic, and they continue to be here and there, but for the most part, I think we've developed scripts and standards that our users could follow.
So, Robin, what's your consideration about that?
It's interesting because my perspective is very, very different than Victoria's. There's a whole staff in the Knesset that worries about the stuff that Victoria worries about. So I don't have to deal with that. But what I do have to deal with when we're talking about demands, it's very interesting because your question was insights, the most common digital demands you receive from colleagues of the technical staff. Well, it's backwards by us. We, the staff of the website, we have demands from the technical staff of, let's say, the computer department of the Knesset. And I'll give you an example. Again, I mentioned earlier, was that I guess that was in my first presentation about the integrity of data. Okay, now we have a situation where the website, if anyone from the public is going to view the website, and let's say, and I'm going to give you an example of something that happened last week. Okay, we had a member of parliament basically was forced to resign because a different member of parliament who became a minister came back to parliament, resigned as a minister, came back as a member of parliament, and then that basically ousted the person, the member of parliament that came in his place originally. Anyhow, so on one day we had a situation where basically we have to make a switch. We have to switch. You know, we always have 120 members of Knesset, and you can't have 119, and you can't have 121. We always have 120. And if somebody from the public goes and they look, and we know that the switch had to happen at 2 o'clock, and they look at 6 o'clock in the evening, and they see that the wrong member of parliament is in, okay, who looks bad in the end? We look bad. We, the website staff. Why did we switch the member of parliament? Well, here's the problem. The website staff, again, this has recently changed, we don't have permissions. This is not, it's not our job to switch in the internal system of the Knesset, to switch, you know, membership of parliament members, okay? And our demand is that, you know what, the public is looking at us, somebody has to make that switch on time, or the Knesset's going to look bad. The people in the computer department are not outside, they're not outside, they're not looking to the outside, they're looking at themselves in terms of, like, you know, what needs to be done. And they're saying to themselves, well, what's the difference if, like, tomorrow morning we make the switch? Who cares? You know, it's going to be switched, but, you know, no, it's not. That's not the case. You know, the public is looking, somebody's looking at us. And yes, it happened that the switch was made at 6 o'clock instead of at 2 o'clock. And yes, we got complaints. Okay, somebody from the public noticed. And so again, so our demands are on the technical staff to make sure that that when we don't have permissions, somebody's got to make sure that the integrity of the data of the website is up to date. Okay, that is number one. And then when the second part of your question was, what about members of parliament? Well, in the end of the day, members of parliament, again, they want their information correctly to be, or I should say, the information to be displayed correctly to the public as it should be. And so that's, you know, their demands are that it's always on time. And also, we had a situation last week where the computer department made a little switch that broke like some of the data, so to speak. And it was, you know, and the public sees it, and we right away get, you know, the complaints, the comments, and we knew where to fix it. We couldn't fix it. We had to get the computer department to fix it. But again, because who noticed it first, by the way? The Knesset members themselves noticed that, wait a minute, I was a member of that committee, but not anymore. How come it says I'm a member of that committee? I stopped being a member of that committee. And like, you know, we didn't make that change. Somebody made that change. So it's very, so that's something that's very tricky. Once upon a time, again, a few years ago, it was all in our hands, and it was shifted, because the truth is, who's the website staff to decide or to, you know, to follow up on that information? In the end of the day, somebody has to make sure it's right. Now, one other thing that I wanted to mention is that sometimes the demands of members of parliament can be conflicting. And I'll give you an example. Somebody in the Knesset had an idea, someone in the administrative staff had an idea that maybe we should make public the diaries or the schedules of personal schedules, by the way, of the Knesset members. In other words, if a Knesset member has, I don't know, a Google Calendar, let's make that public for everybody. Now, first of all, again, that raises the question, is that the job of the parliament? Do I need to know that my Knesset member has a dentist appointment? I don't know. So that was one, you know, that's one question. And then, okay, let's say someone decides, you know what, that's a great idea. Not every Knesset member is going to want their diary to be public. And then what happens is the ones whose diaries are not public, people are going to think they're hiding something. So, you know, where do you draw that line? You know, when some members of parliament make a demand, but not everybody wants it, you know, luckily not my decision. Somebody else has to make that decision. You know, that's bounced up to the top, and then we just would implement it. But again, those are issues that definitely come up and have to be dealt with on a regular basis. Okay.
Thank you, Robin. And Patricia?
I'll answer this question from a different perspective, as I personally didn't work with any internal solutions for the pandemic challenge. But as in Knesset, we also have a different team to take care of technical issues. With home office, our colleagues started to use the website more often as a tool work, and we had new demands about the website. This led to two consequences. A positive one was the attention driven to the content, which helped us to make pressure for some error corrections. But on the other hand, a scenario in which a platform designed for the non-specialist citizen becomes essential to internal users is not good. It brings a huge bias about how the information should be written and disposed, because the thousands of internal visits per year outweighs the thousands of millions of external visits, as the internal voices are unfortunately louder. So the demands are usually to make the internal users' experience better on the website. And that has challenged us a lot. It showed us once more that we need a very robust intranet environment to not contaminate the website with internal demands. But we don't have it. Our culture is to use the website for working proposals. So we have to differentiate that even more to make a better website.
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, all these challenges are really challenging, you know. So the equilibrium, the balance of these demands and what you have to deliver, it's really tough. So I will move for our third round, where I will start a question for someone, and then we'll have comments about that. So starting with Robin, let's consider that the thoughts about the most common demands from legislative house, both for MPs and for the staff. We know that the legislative digital transformation requires a deep understanding about the legislative processes and the institutions and history and traditions. It's a common mistake, but with grave consequence, major consequence, to treat the digital transformation in the legislative and from other sectors as the same. Which steps in general would you recommend to analyze how to attend to these demands from internal actors of the House? Starting with Robin, please.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier in one of the questions, the shopping question, yeah, about shopping for ideas. If you take, let's say, most of the people who I assume are listening to this panel, okay, are people who work with Parliament, you know, in their, whichever country they are in the world, and you take all of us and you put us into a room, okay, or you took me or any one of the three of us from parliaments and put them into a room full of people from their own countries, but who work in other government offices. In the end of the day, I'm going to have more in common with, you know, the person from Africa that works in a parliament over there. I will understand their work much better because, again, like we've mentioned earlier, and you mentioned it right in this question, our parliamentary work it's unique in the sense that all parliaments are very, very similar in terms of what they do and the information that they have to get out to the public. And again, as opposed to the internal ministry of, you know, the ministry that has to deal with passports or the ministry that has to deal with finances and stuff like that, super different. And you know, again, and it's funny because if there was some kind of a convention where I met my colleagues from other government offices, and they're all worried about payment forms and, you know, online payments and stuff like that. And that doesn't exist in our world. I mean, I don't know if by you guys it would. I can't imagine really why. But that, you know, it's just a different world. But at the same time, we can all understand how difficult it is to present bills and laws to the public in a friendly way. Okay, so the bottom line is that yes, legislative houses have unique demands and needs, and again, and it you know, if you want to call it historical or whatever it is. In the end of the day, I think that the success of the website in the Knesset is. And when I say success, I mean the fact that we are able to roll out projects very quickly. We are able to understand what the public wants and get it to them as quickly as possible. It's because the people on our staff are very, I would say, very entrenched inside of the Knesset. Like I said, I've been working here since 1997, so I know how the Knesset works. My boss has been working here, and one of the other main colleagues has been working here also since 1997. Other members of our staff have been working here since 2001. And the newer staff, again, okay, so they're newer, but what happens is the culture of our staff is to learn the life of the parliament and to be the life of the parliament. That's us. And then that way, when something new comes up, new ideas come up, we know exactly, you know, we don't have to go and learn the parliamentary side of things. We know it, we live it, this is us. As opposed to when the Knesset wants to make a project, let's say some other digitization project in another department, and they go and find a company, an outside company that comes in and does the work. Often that work gets thrown in the garbage because the company doesn't get it. They're not inside the parliament. They don't understand the needs. They don't understand what you want. What do we want from them? So yes, my main recommendation would be when you are working on digitizing, whether it's internal or for the external in the form of a website or an app or, you know, mobile sites or whatever it is, the people involved have to be loyal and fully understanding of the parliament itself. To me, that's more important than being a technical person, okay? The best is to be a combination of both, whether you're a user, you know, you have expertise in, you know, user interfaces and user experience and graphic arts or technical stuff, website and how to write code or databases, whatever it is, you've got to have that side of the parliament, or you're just gonna miss the point. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Robin. So Victoria, what were your considerations about that?
For sure, and I love what Robin's saying around, you know, missing the point. You know, there are long-standing traditions within the parliament, our parliament and House of Commons, and they're very similar to other houses. They're very similar to other parliaments. There's this commonality in certain traditions, and not seeing the importance of that is missing the point. And I think that sometimes we you know, technology seems to have the false impression that it solves things. Technology doesn't solve any problems. What technology should do is enhance tradition, and it'll help us to solve the problems. It's a tool. It's not the solution. So it's really a tool in the toolbox of trying to fix whatever we're trying to fix. Now, with regards to, you know, traditions in general and the way things are done, truly, when we boil it down, it's about producing information. When somebody goes to a website to look at a bill, they're looking for information about that bill. They're looking for information about an MP or what happened that day, or to listen to proceedings or what was the output of a committee. Ultimately, it's about information. So having a real understanding about information, what that information flow looks like, what it should look like, and the user story around those information packages and what to do with them. Now, there's a lot of work that goes into producing information. You look at a bill and how many hours of committee work, how many hours in a chamber, how many hours in the Senate. There's so many pieces to make a bill official and into law. And really all people that want to, you know, the public especially, they'll go to the website and try to just look up, okay, give me the summary of this bill. But it's been hours of multiple people. So how do you facilitate that? Committees is a big area where it's often misunderstood by the public. What they see is what we have as question period, where people are bantering about in the chamber and you know, holding the government accountable. But truly, that's the show. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that you still need to facilitate. There's some traditions involved. We moved to a digital committee, so e-paper, paperless committee, where instead of carrying around, you know, several pounds of books and binders, you can carry around a tablet. And it was great. It solved one problem, but there's this physicality with procedure and with protocol where standing up and clapping is very difficult to replicate in a virtual world. You know, showing support, looking somebody in the eyes. There's this physicality with tradition that the digital world doesn't necessarily replicate one for one. So it's really around, if hybrid is here to stay, which I do believe it is, I truly believe that we need to keep adapting, but respecting tradition and keeping true the relationships and the collaboration levels of, for the MPs, for example, an MP to an MP, or an MP to their riding, an MP to their party, the party to party, and MP to parliament and process and duty. All of those relationships are very different, and the information flow in those relationships are very different. So we need to keep respecting those and really keep questioning, is the technology trying to replace tradition, or is it there to enhance it? And we need to keep reminding ourselves it's only there to enhance the tradition. And yeah, that's really what we try to keep reminding ourselves of.
Thank you, Victoria. And Patricia?
And the main challenge I see at the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies is that the MP technological demands take time to be developed and launched, and they aren't usually aligned to the administrative strategy and on demands to the digital transformation. Or they are conflicting with each other, as Robin said. It takes time, money, and human resources to attend to those demands, and they skip the line and are put in front of other important but invisible structural changes like information and metadata management, digital process modeling before launching new platforms, and so on. An example of our technical need is to make sure that the internal processes involving filling fields in systems and also metadata are accurate. This implies a huge effort in defining rules, training the people who enter the information, and also making decisions about the data legacy. It's very important that these rules are the same at every system used by each different team to keep consistency, as Robin also pointed that problem. We have dozens of systems here, and artificial intelligence won't solve everything, as Victoria said. It must be taught too. So these procedures have to be set. And many of our problems are related to information inaccuracy and its recovery by search engines or internal systems caused by human mistakes. We should analyze those MP demands, those political demands, aligned to the real priority of the legislative chamber, because MPs go away and the problems remain with us. Each new system or platform also demands further maintenance, but this discussion depends, of course, on the maturity of the administrative and technical area and the power level of the administrative versus the political area. It's not the same in every parliament.
Perfect, Patricia. Thank you. So, Robin, want to comment all these views?
Actually, yeah, I do want to say in what I talked about earlier, completely missed what Victoria talked about, and I think it is super important to try to really figure out. And I have a feeling that I'm going to talk about that in a different question, but the idea of, again, the pandemic brought us to a point that we didn't have a choice but to have hybrid, and at some point it wasn't even hybrid. It was all Zoom. Okay, committee meetings were completely on Zoom. On the other hand, the Knesset has not gotten around yet to figuring out if we can have plenary sessions on Zoom. In fact, to the point where if a Knesset member is not present at a plenary session, she cannot vote. So We've had situations where, you know, members with Corona come to the plenary, they have their own little section. In terms of technology, yes, they've created, the staff of the computer department has made it possible to have them in their own isolation section and yet participate physically in the building. And of course, all of the other traditional stuff, like you said about clapping, here in the Knesset, it's less clapping and more, I don't know, arguing something. But the point is that there's something face-to-face that is missing with the technology. And I don't think that technology can ever actually replace that. One of the things, though, that Victoria mentioned, you said, what's going to happen? You know, you basically said that we have to learn, technology has to basically enhance the traditions. But you know what? The three of us might be of a generation that's going to be lost soon, okay, when we finish our work and we retire and go have fun. Am I having fun now? I don't know. But when we retire and someone else comes into our place, the next generation, they really might not see it that way. They might see technology being number one, traditions being number two. So, you know, it's going to be up to us to really educate that next generation. You know, good luck to us, because I think that the competition, which is technology, is very strong. I hope that we can actually, you know, figure that one out. So that was my comment about.
Thank you. So it's really important to enhance the importance of the tradition of the house. I have to speak by a personal perspective. Was from the business management area, so the processes are really similar. When you're talking about digital transformation, it's more, I'll take from here and just put here, and that's not that much time details to adaptation. And when it happens, it's only about the technology per se. But when we are talking about parliaments, about legislative houses, we had to have more attention, more care with the tradition, with how the things works. Because now that I am in the public management area, for example, I see, and even for the public policy, the cycle of the public policy generation, for example, that are so many time details that have to be respected. And as all of you said, and also Victoria, technology enhances these traditions. And I think, Robin, the new generation, that's maybe my generation, I don't know. I think they are learning, for example, in college, don't know, by experience, that we have to mix more technology, but even respecting the process we have in the house. I hope so. So that's a message for my generation too. So I will move for the next round of the questions. We are going to the end of the debate soon. We have 2 more questions. And the next one, starting with Victoria's, legislative houses as representative consensus building institutions have traditions and internal dynamics that impact behavior and processes. Sometimes there are occasions where a process that could be improved is maintained by design for the aforementioned reasons. Moreover, we know that different areas of legislatures might have their specific set of traditions, as mentioned by all of you, and the way they work, and for consequence, the way they interact with internal systems. And with that, Victoria, how do you think, what do you think on how do you cope with this challenge in your house, for example?
Sure. And a lot of the the same sort of topics that we were just discussing, pertain to this question. But I think that in general, change is inevitable. Whether it's a pandemic or technological advancements or just evolutions of the way that people are. There's a demand, being in the IT world in the past, many years ago, we used to push technology on people. We used to try to convince them that, something like email was useful. I know it seems kind of archaic or weird, but it wasn't more than 20 years ago that Wi-Fi didn't even exist. So trying to look at how fast technologies and ways that we work introduce kind of, there's this difference of opinion. And when you look at some people, I remember one discussion that I had with a now retired MP, and I was trying to explain how an improvement to the email address standard would benefit him. And his answer was, why do I even need email in the first place? And that, it was a stark reminder that the perception of tradition, the perception of the way things are done is very different with everyone. And it's very, very ingrained in some people. Now, when we look at change, it's very important for us not to lose scope that over hundreds of years that these traditions have been building and forming, they've taken on different kind of look, feel, they've manifested themselves in different ways. Now that we're kind of in the middle of this huge hump of large change around the world, we do need to kind of keep going back, taking a pulse and checking just to make sure things like, are we giving an advantage to a governing party versus an opposition party? Are the changes that we're making, will they benefit a majority government, a minority government, a smaller party? How does it affect the dynamics between these parties? Does it give people a party more of a voice, less of a voice? The whole dynamics of the way the government is run and the way that the political sort of arena is, you really don't want to be making huge changes in this because you don't know what the ramifications are. One example of this is around our vote call. So we ring bells around the parliamentary precinct here in Ottawa when there's a vote call and MPs need to return back to the chamber to vote. Now there's this physicality with that if you're across town at a committee and you need to make it back to the chamber, there's this physical distance you need to cover and walk. That's gone with virtual. So you could be at home and your phone buzzes and there's a vote bell and you can vote. So what did that do? And I'm not going to comment on what it did, but we need to ask ourselves, what did that change in the dynamic of Parliament in our democratic process by doing that? And it could have enhanced it, could have put other things in a spiral of other change, but we do need to keep analyzing that just to make sure that the change to tradition is done for the right reasons and we understand what the ramifications are, because there's always a subsequent thing that needs to be considered for every change.
Thank you, Victoria. So Patricia, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. We cope with that challenge with lots of resilience, supposing that the changes you want to work for the better and they are just maintained by design, as you said. The only way to cope with that takes time and effort. It's redesigning the processes, making prototypes, testing them with the internal public and making improvements to convince them. It's not talking about simply adopting a new technology here, but about changing internal work processes. That's where hurts people, changing their processes, what they're used to do. Showing something causes more impact than pure argumentation, and we need to show the advantages. And still, we will see resistance due to lack of confidence, and even to the loss of the small power of people whose manual tasks won't be that important anymore. So I think the best way to do it, unfortunately, is doing it before launching and showing people it could work. But it really takes time and effort and human resources. It's more expensive than just taking the decision and doing it anyway.
Thank you, Patricia. So Robbie, do you want to comment?
Yeah. The answer to, it's funny because you have a very, it's a long question that you wrote, and I have a one-word answer, and the answer is patience. Okay, patience. I think that we have developed in the past, again, I've been at the Knesset for a long time and doing this for a long time, and yes, similar to what Victoria said, there were, till all 120 Knesset members wanted to use email. Again, remember I started working here in 1997. Till all of them wanted to use email, it took years. We used to have a field in our database, which was email, yes, no. Okay, it wasn't the email address, which we also had, but it started with email, yes, no, and which was, do they even have email? So once upon a time, that was actually a question. So sometimes I think, and everything that Patricia said, that if, you know, that we have new technologies and we want to bring it, so we have to spend time and money explaining and you know, it's almost like selling it to we're telling them, we have something great for you to use, go ahead and use it. But again, so we've learned that you need a lot of patience for this, and until someone is ready to use it, they're not going to use it. And I'm going to give you actually, we have a very interesting example. In 1999, one of the Knesset members, the one who was actually the one who pushed for having a website back in '96, okay, he opened up a committee that was called an online committee. So if you can imagine now what a hybrid committee session now looks like. You basically have some people sitting in a room, you have the Knesset members sitting in a room and other, you know, invitees from the outside, and you have a screen, which is basically the Zoom and all the people who are participating from the outside, and there's a dialogue between them. This online committee that he made back in 1999 was really like a precursor to this, in which the committee was televised. People can get to a page on the website, watch the committee live, and again, rather than being able to speak in the committee, they can type on the spot and open up a chat and type their questions, their comments right on the spot. And there was a person sitting in that committee room. Again, you have to remember this was so new and so radical at the time that, you know, what you have to do, they needed to bring in a person just to monitor the questions and the answers. Now, the idea was so before its time, I can't begin to tell you. We had one or two people from the public that were always on that committee, and nobody else. In other words, it basically flopped because it was before its time. The public wasn't ready for it. The infrastructure of internet wasn't ready for it. But the idea was there. So again, so it's a matter of patience. And you know how long it took? You realize how long it took till this actually worked? It took until this pandemic, because all of a sudden the pandemic created a need. So it's almost like once the Knesset members saw that they need to be on email, even though it took, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years from the time that the website started, that's when they started using it. So in other words, that's the bottom line is that do we want to spend money and time creating things that the potential users aren't even going to use until they're ready to use it? So maybe we need to go backwards and say, you know what, they're going to say, okay, we have this need, and then we develop it? Or do we develop it and say, we have this great thing for you, but no one's going to use it? So, or again, out of 120 members of Knesset, 10 use it. Was it worth it? Was it worth the millions of shekel that it cost to develop it? I don't know. So again, so that's the challenge. But again, my main answer is that we have to have patience. Those of us who want to run forward with technology, sometimes we have to take a deep breath and say when they're ready.
Thank you, Robin. So Victoria, do you want to comment and finish this round?
For sure. And I love what Patricia and Robin said, and patience really is the word. You know, over the years, as Robin said, you know, you're building things, and, you know, I'm going to quote the old movie Field of Dreams: if you build it, they will come. That's not necessarily the case, or it wasn't the case for many, many years, where you really needed this marketing campaign to try to convince people to start using some of these technologies or products that you're developing. We are seeing a shift, though, and as Robin said, during the pandemic, there was a need. And consumerization of technology is really influencing the next generation of MPs and their staff. They're younger, they're more technology savvy. So instead of us trying to push, in fact, the tables have turned and they're pushing it on us. So truly the challenge is not offering them something that they need, is that it's the opposite, is that they're requesting or demanding certain things that may or may not be within the ecosystem that you've developed. And that's the challenge. It's how do you answer to what they are asking for or sometimes demanding when it kind of goes against what you're trying to build. And so it's a really different dynamic of challenge, but ultimately it is really about patience, and it's change management. Regardless of whether the person wants it or not, you're cutting into the way they work. And Patricia said it perfectly. They're ingrained in the way they work. They're comfortable in the way they work. And changing that truly is much more delicate and intrinsic than just dumping technology on somebody.
Sure, thank you, Victoria. So we are moving to our last question of this debate, and happily can be here for a day, for a month. But we are running out of time soon. So starting with Patricia, and as my final question, I would like to take a leap to the future, like future machine or a crystal ball, for example, for the next decade in legislative modernization. In an ever-growing scenario where the hybrid could be the norm in some specific case, under the rules of procedure and the need to replicate dynamic presenting in the in-person activities today, something not only important for MPs and staff, but also to other groups such as lobbyists. What is the next step in improving user experience and interaction, if you want to get this layer 2 for legislative digital services?
Okay, we're talking about UX and not technology itself. So you're still not thinking about the metaverse or something like that. As Robin said, we're not spending time and money on edge technologies if we have other problems to solve, other challenges to manage for the next decade. We have a non-technological need. And again, I'm speaking here from the citizen's perspective. I think this need is to adopt plain language at the digital services. We must realize that the Parliament is the primary source of legislative information in this fake news era, and it should be used as a fact-checked by regular, non-specialist citizens without the need of translation. The plain language concept arose 40 decades ago, 40. Mainly in the US and Spanish countries, but it's still crawling in many countries, Brazil included. Plain language can be done with the help of artificial intelligence to, for example, summarize bills and laws, but it takes a human effort to present the information under the best practices of cognitive psychology and informational design. When it's fully done, citizens will be able to find what they want, to understand what they found, and to use the information in the desired context. By context, I mean this. If you want to know how did your congressman vote on a specific bill, you should be able to understand what does that yes or no vote mean in the context of the votation and also in the context of the bill, of the text. We are far from that. We have all this information on our website, but to understand that information on the context is very difficult yet. It's for specialists. So I think that's our goal, our UX goal for the next decade.
Yeah, plain language and this area, for example, in many areas, but focusing on that area is a powerful tool to also to bring innovation and more people involved in these discussions, for example. Robin, what's your opinion about this question?
Actually, I want to comment on the plain language thing. First of all, thank you, Patricia, for bringing that up. There was some conference years ago, a parliamentary conference that happened here at the Knesset, actually, and I participated in one of the, I listened to one of the presentations, and it was one of the parliaments, I don't remember which one, which apparently on every page of their website, I feel like it was one of the Scandinavian parliaments, but I'm not sure. Every page of their website had like a little button, and again, we're talking about years ago, 2015, 14, that basically translated every page into plain language. And our staff was really impressed by that idea. But then we started doing the calculations. And yes, for the public, I think it's critical. The problem was, and again, if you're talking about artificial intelligence, but in the end of the day, it seemed that the only way that we can really do that properly is to bring in a huge staff of experts. And that's the problem. You need people who really know what they're doing to translate documents into plain language. And it's almost like its own profession. And then once you're talking about that, you're talking about many people, many salaries, much money, okay? Lots of, you're talking about a lot of money, a lot of investment, and it just kind of fell apart. The idea kind of fell apart. So that's, I think it's a great idea. I don't see it happening in the near future over here. But I would love to see something like that. My answer to the question was actually in terms of, Sarah, you asked pretty much about the concept of hybrid. Is that something that's going to continue or whatever? It's very interesting. I think that, I'm looking at two people here who are coming from countries that are large, physically large. And so when you're talking about having the ability for a member of parliament who lives a 4-hour plane ride, let's say, from, I assume in Canada that's possible, no? To have a 4-hour plane ride from their parliament, okay? You're not talking about walking 4 blocks from their house. You're talking about, when they're home, they're far away. In Israel, the farthest you're going to get from the Knesset is a 2.5-hour drive, okay, whether it's north or south. All right, that's as far to, okay, let's say 3, 4, maybe, okay. Anyhow, it's much closer, so it's much easier for the Knesset members to be physically present. And like I said, no, they have not figured out a way to not need the Knesset members here for a physical vote. But that doesn't seem to be the end of the world, because the democratic process will continue because they're not so far away. It's easy for them to get here. It's easy for them to be here. The demands of their physical presence here in the Knesset are 3 days a week. So hybrid in that sense, I don't know if that's so necessary for the democratic process to be enhanced or to continue. Again, during the pandemic, different story, but we're talking now about regular life, okay? How the hybrid's going to enhance democracy outside of the pandemic. So on the other hand, and here's on the other hand, I think it will very much enhance democracy by the fact that people let's say experts or invitees to committee meetings can be present in the hybrid space during these committee meetings without having to be physically in the Knesset. And that makes much more sense, because you're talking about people who have a regular workday and they have to drop everything and get to Jerusalem, participate in the committee meeting and then go back to where they're going. You know what? It's so much easier to allow them, and seems more democratic, because then they can just be wherever they are and participate without the need to, to fight traffic, to get in their car and come in public transportation, whatever it might be. So my answer is that I see the two sides of it, that maybe we don't need it so much for the parliamentary members themselves, but I think it's such an amazing tool to bring the public, as more into the participation of the parliament. So
nice perspective. Thank you, Roedel. So Victoria, do you want to comment on that?
For sure. So I love what both Patricia and Robin said, and I think that evolution, when you look at the next 10 years, and 10 years from a technological perspective is multiple generations away, and there's so much change ahead of us. I mentioned before that 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, Wi-Fi didn't exist. And think of the difference in this world before that and after that. Wireless connectivity, where you have access to information anywhere, anytime. Then the question is that information valid? And to Patricia's point, there's a lot of, what we're calling that tag phrase, fake news, but it's just inaccuracies in information, or it's information that has some literary license applied to it. They've bent it a certain way for a certain reason, and cutting through that is very difficult. Now we talk about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence, I think, when you fast forward 10 years, I believe that there's going to be a level of trust that's much higher than today with artificial intelligence. You look at transcription, we looked at this for even internal purposes, because we need to transcribe so much and translate so much, that artificial intelligence just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't good enough. The language, when you speak about a bill could be something that you post on a light post, because that's the play that's being down the street. It's a bill, a play bill, or it could be a bill at a restaurant, or it could be a bill that will turn into law. The word bill, just the meaning of that has various connotations, and the artificial intelligence engines are catching up. They are catching up, and the language is getting a little bit better. The understanding is getting a little bit better, but it's that convergence of trust and evolution. Where those meet, I'm not sure when that's going to be, but that's going to be the difficult part, is the looking at it and saying, I trust it enough to use it. It's kind of like the first time that somebody stepped onto an airplane that has autopilot, or the self-driving, and you're like, when do I trust it enough to be able to use it? And we'll figure what that will be. But truthfully, if you look at an interesting stat, the 18-year-olds, which are the new voters here, the 18-year-olds today they don't remember a life without a smartphone. They're the new voters. They're also, within the next 10 years, going to be the new MPs and the new staff of MPs. They're going to be the people who are influencing bills, influencing laws in the next 10 years. Their technological understanding is a lot different than ours. Their reality is very different than ours. And when you look at, I keep coming back to 20 years ago when Wi-Fi didn't exist. I've done many talks with regards to strategy and future of technology. And I used to say this sentence, and it was kind of a debatable sentence, but I said, this sentence makes complete sense today, where you're on a plane between two cities and you connect your phone to Wi-Fi and you watch your favorite TV program. 25 years ago, that sentence didn't make sense. It absolutely didn't make sense in any which way. The only part that made sense is you're on a plane, because there was no Wi-Fi. Watching TV on a smartphone didn't exist. The smartphone didn't even exist. The only place that you would actually watch TV is on a TV, and much less, a smartphone being able to do so much more today. So we need to be prepared. I think continually looking at what doesn't make sense today, and thinking, just like that sentence I said, what sentence can we talk about today that doesn't make any sense, but in 10, 20 years will make complete sense. And we need to start predicting those things. We need to be prepared for these, because not being prepared has a huge cost. So there's an investment that needs to happen. And this is a dialogue that needs to continue. And if we don't, we will be running up to the next pandemic, whatever that pandemic is. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be a virus. It could be any sort of crisis, and we will be ill prepared, or some sort of advancement, and we will be ill prepared. You can imagine the day that somebody, it won't be a day, but it could happen where there's this huge advancement in either computing, quantum computing, or any sort of other technology that changes the way things are done, that changes what the public is capable of doing, or what the MPs are capable of doing, or what the demands of the public are. And it could happen overnight. So we need to continually be prepared to be able to face these challenges and do it in some sort of an educational, sort of smart way, without reacting just for the sake of reacting.
Thank you for your considerations, Victoria. As you said, this exercise to think in the future, and even not knowing yet the full capacity of the future, as you given an example, it was hard to imagine Wi-Fi 20 years ago, and now we meet someone in some places, or even in your own houses. Oh, nice to see you again. What is your Wi-Fi user and password like? So this exercise to think about the future and what we can improve for the future for the internal and external users is really important. So we are going to the end of our debate today, and happily, but after before we finish, I would like to invite you to 2 for 3 minutes closing remarks, starting with Patricia, then Robin, then Victoria.
Well, I'm a testing activist. As Robin already know, we have been together in other debate before, and always my final remarks are about this. Always, I advise everybody to test what they are doing with the targeted audience, even if it's internal or external or MPs. They are totally different audiences. They have specificities, not only about language, but about how they cope with new technologies. And it's easy to make tests. We have a test that was preconized by Jacob Nielsen with 5 people and following with iterations. And it's easy to make with every audience. And I really advise you to do that, because it changes completely your product for the better. And if someone wants to know how we have done it, in everything we launch, it's an easy process. I'll let my email on the chat so we can talk.
Thank you, Patricia. Robin?
I think in the end of the day, we all talk about technology. In the end of the day, I think it's all about the people. So, the people who work behind the scenes, our customers, our clients, those who put demands on us, our families, everything. In the end of the day, the technology is there for us. We're not there for the technology. That's what I would want everybody to pretty much remember. And again, it's coming from someone who sits and does technology all day. But in the end, it's, you know, it's all about the people. And so speaking about people, I would like to thank you again, Sarah, for inviting me to participate in this and have given the opportunity to learn and to share what I've learned over the years and to gather information and experience from like the years of experience of everybody else. And, you know, again, you know, my shopping for ideas thing there, but, you know, you can always learn from everybody. And I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for running these conferences. I think they're, you know, they're great, super important, and you know, and invaluable, really. Like, so thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Victoria?
Yeah, so also thank you so much. And thank you to Patricia and Robin as well. This was a really great dialogue. And I love doing these because you end up learning so much. And then you also learn how common a lot of our issues are. But really, when you boil it down, I'm going to kind of borrow from Patricia and Robin. It's really around building trust and testing. I love that idea because it's about building trust. And ultimately, it is about humans. It's about people. So let's never forget about the change management. And change management is often misunderstood. It's about, oh, well, when can we make the change? You know, it's scheduling the change. That's what change management becomes. It's a scheduling board. No, it's really around how does it cut to the perception that people have on what they need to do? What's the trust level? How do you build that trust so that you could show that the change, we're going to be there for them. We're going to understand the impacts to them, their business, and what they do and the processes involved so that you can actually move this forward for the benefit of the user. Truly understanding their user story, their the flow of the process, what they actually do is crucial to any change. So truly, bolstering change management will always come back as a huge investment to the organization.